Welcome to Transformer CEOs with me, Erik Schmidt. This week, it was a personal pleasure to be joined by a true transformer. Alexander Lacik is president and CEO of Pandora, the world's largest jewellery business by volume. He has successfully led the global transformation of the company, named most successful turnaround in Danish corporate history, and has personally been named CEO of the Year there. I think you'll like how he talks vividly about the cultural transformation, his focus on fixing the brand as the single big idea to drive performance, and like other CEOs, how the CEOship was not something he sought out, and when it came, his loneliness in the early months until he surrounded himself with world-class talent. In addition to Transformer CEOs, I run a successful advisory and consulting company working with CEOs, chairmen, and investors to deliver successful business transformations. I hope you enjoy what you're going to see and hear from Alexander. Please leave comments, because here at Transformer CEOs, we love your feedback. So Alexander, 7 years as CEO at Pandora, including CEO of the Year in Denmark. I'm curious, how did 12 years at P&G and 12 years at Reckitt Benckiser prepare you for the top job?
It was actually 13 and 13, but it's the same thing. How did they prepare me? In quite different ways, in fact. So P&G was kind of, and I hate to call it, a lot of people say P&G is a good business school. No, it's not a school. It's a company, a commercial company. However, the way they operate is very structured. When I started, for the last 150 years, the approach in the company was the principle of promoting from within. So, which meant that you needed to have a quite structured way of how you trained the organization, because somewhere out there was the future leaders of the company. So in a way, you got a very, very good functional training in the early days. And of course, as you grew up, then you got a bit more, let's say, enterprise training. But it was a very, I would say, formative part of my career. One thing is you go through school and uni and all of those good things, but that's all just theory. Here, it's put to practice. And part of the evaluation of the managers in the company at the time was not only on business results, but also on how good they were on building their organizations. So you got a couple of pointers there. And of course, then I stayed for quite many years through different functions and some different geographic exposure. So I think that's kind of how I learned sales from the ground up. I started as a sales rep, first day on the job, got the sales aid, I got the keys to the car, and then you had to hit the road and go sell, and you had your targets, and then your unit manager was training you on selling skills. And then halfway through my journey at P&G, I pivoted into marketing, which is also a little bit odd because that's not how they designed the career tracks. Once you were in one swim lane, you're supposed to stay in your swim lane. And I said, no, I want to try my wings in the other one, because arguably P&G is one of the big companies when it comes to brand building somehow. So after a lot of work, I managed to kind of switch lanes. And then the sales guy said, when you fail, you can come back to us. You're welcome back in the fold. I never went back. They kind of saw me as that he went to the dark side. But again, inside marketing, the same thing. Very methodical. You went through all the mechanics of how you run a brand, essentially. And then as you kind of move through the managerial steps, you got larger and larger responsibilities as time went by. Then I went to Reckitt Benckiser, which was actually populated by a lot of ex-P&G folks. But the people that were from the P&G were cut out of the 5% in P&G. They were not typical proctoids. They were more the renegades, the people that said, yeah, process is nice, but we'd rather focus on doing business first. Whereas in P&G, somehow a lot of the time was not only about what you do, but how you did. Reckitt was, in the early days, was not at all about how you do things, was purely get me the results. We don't really care. Well, stay in the confines of the law, please. But if you're on the line, that's also okay, as long as you get the numbers. So that becomes much more entrepreneurial in the approach of how you delivered things. I always say, in P&G, if you had a question, you could pick up the phone and there was always 100 people somewhere in the company who could help you answer. In Reckitt, it was more like you pick up the phone, if there was one. There's nobody on the other side of the line. So you were constantly confronted with this resource allocation questions like, how am I going to spend my time? People didn't care how you spent your time as long as you delivered the results. Now, two quite extreme cultures, both companies that are hugely successful. Both, I think, the commonality is that you have strong brands that you're selling to consumers. That trifecta is me. So both foundational in different parts of my life. I think I was successful in Reckitt because I had the structure from P&G. I'm not sure the other way around would have been equally successful. We will never know, of course. But I'm a big believer that I got the foundations right, and then I could apply the foundations, because clearly I was not allowing Procter to completely mold me. You know me well, and that's not easy to begin with, but especially if corporates try, that's the dead duck. But so somehow the two experiences really created who I am from a professional standpoint, surely. And then stepping into Pandora after some other twists and turns, I kind of, my view coming in, because it was a complete rebuild that was in front of me. And I said, great, this is going to be my last operating role. I'm going to build the company I always wanted to work for. So I'm going to take the best parts of both worlds, shave off the stuff that I didn't like, because there was plenty in both, and then try to put that into Pandora.
Amazing. So let's come on to that in just a second, because you've set it up beautifully for what came next. Let's stick with the CEO journey for a minute. So when did it become apparent that CEOship was within grasp, was an aspiration or ambition you had?
The truth of the matter was never. When I was, and I think I can remember even the moment, I was like 6 or 7 years old. We were a couple of guys on bicycles. When you get your bike when you're young, that's freedom, right? You can start moving around. It's very exciting. And then, of course, when you're 5 guys on a bike, somebody needs to take the lead. And that was me. I said, I'm going to lead. And that's kind of stuck with me. Why is that? Part of that might be my immigrant background. We came in the late 60s from Czechoslovakia, my mother and father and me. They had a difficult life, I would say, in Sweden, because it was never really accepted with the education they had and whatnot. And I grew up with a strange name in a quite homogeneous society, I would say. No other immigrant kids there. So I always had to fight hard for my viewpoint. And I think that deep down that hardened me in the sense of, I'm going to rule my own destiny. I'm not going to, let other people tell me what to do. Initially, they tried just because I was an immigrant. The purest form of racism, if you may. And now you can turn that into something very aggressive or negative, and maybe I did in the beginning, who knows. But certainly that's been a core piece of me, is like, I'm gonna decide over my own destiny. That's the driver. So independence, kind of managing myself, and the fact that that led to CEO was more a fluke than me saying I need to be a CEO by X time. That was never really the driver. The driver was that, let's say, independence trait that I think formed when we came to Sweden, actually.
Fascinating. So I guess it was a readiness point, though. Your feelings of independence and leading. Somebody picked up the phone and said, "How about Pandora?" And you said,
"Well, as you know, from a professional standpoint, it's kind of been a constant progression, somehow from all the way through." And of course, because I had this idea of need to get to the top so that I don't have anybody above me, which of course is a bit naive, but that's kind of what it's been about. So I've quite quickly I think I was the youngest promoted or fastest promoted sales director in P&G's history. So I was younger than pretty much all of my colleagues. And where did he come from? And did a sensible job, obviously. Then, and that's just kept being the thing. Then actually the Pandora thing, when we've been traveling around for roughly 20 years, and then we decided I decided I wanted my kids to actually experience Sweden. They have Swedish passport, but never really lived in Sweden. So we need to go home. You need to experience Sweden, so you get a different perspective, and get the perspective of where we come from, me and Maria, my wife. And then I was going to retire. And that was a shit decision, because a few months in, it was like, Maria didn't think it was a great idea. But I also didn't really enjoy doing nothing. It was let's say, bad decision. But that's what happens in life. And then I started kind of trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do now? And after, as I said, after a while, then the phone rang on the Pandora job. And I actually, when they called me, I remember this really well. I was sitting in a friend's house in Stockholm. We were drinking wine, and then the phone rings. I was like, there's this and this headhunter, which of course I've been in touch with before. I said, we have a job in a jewellery company in Denmark. Are you interested? And all I knew was there's a lot of small jewellery companies in Denmark. So it didn't tick any box. Well, first of all, it's not Stockholm, where we were living. And then it's this small jewellery company. I said, I'm not interested. And before she hung up, I said, by the way, which company is it? Pandora. Never heard of it. So I said, okay, fine, goodbye. And then I was like, well, hang on, maybe I know somebody that actually is on the board of Pandora. So I called her and said, hey, what's this Pandora all about? Oh, yeah, it's one of the largest jewelry companies in the world. Okay, goodbye. And I called back to the headhunter to say, hey, throw my hat in the ring.
I was a little hasty.
Yeah. And then 7 years on, here we are. Yeah. So there was not like this. I have it on a agenda point. I need to get here. That actually was, as I said, more of a fluke.
So having picked up the phone or re-picked up the phone, what was the motivation? Was the motivation maybe not the job? Maybe it was the brief, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. What was it? Because I guess these jobs are tough to get. They're tough to keep. They're lonely. You're not at the top of the tree, even though it's nice to think that way. What was the motivation?
No, I mean, first of all, it wasn't the title. Some people thought, no, it genuinely wasn't the title. It was the fact that it was a global job, because that's kind of where I've spent my career. It was a brand conceived in the Nordic regions, and I've always only worked for multinationals. So I said, it would be quite interesting to end my career on helping a local brand. That's kind of the two drivers of this. At that point, I had no clue on the actual business challenge. So that was like me just reading on the website. I was like, okay, and then speaking, 5 minutes with the headhunter. I said, I'm interested to learn more. And of course, when I then started to learn more, was like, oh, this is a massive turnaround case. This looks like a complete car crash. So it is certainly not a job you kind of, waltz in and have a nice life. This is going to be hard yards. Now, that's actually what I've done through my career. I've always been dealt the difficult cards, probably because people thought maybe he can do something about it. And every one of them, and we can talk about some of them if you want, but every one of them I managed to turn around. And that was everything from organizational changes to brand changes to business model changes. It's been all over the place. That was never my, let's say, desire or intent. That's just how life happened somehow. And I seem to have, some skills that were applicable in this space. And then, so I see this, it's global, it's a brand, it's from kind of this region, and it's a turnaround. Okay, so it kind of ticked a lot of boxes. But again, as I always say when we're in recruiting mode, is like, you're putting your best face forward. This is Friday night at the bar, you're trying to be nice. Then Monday morning comes around and it's like, ooh, maybe it wasn't as great as I thought on Friday night. So this could always happen. So you have to be very aware that both sides are not necessarily disclosing all the dirty laundry at that moment. And especially in this case, because I could read on the numbers that this was going south in a hurry. So I knew that this is going to be a rough one. Which is also why initially I told Maria, we're not moving to Denmark. I'm going to commute and then we'll see. Maybe the board wakes up on Monday morning and say, oops, that's not what we need. Or maybe I turn up and say, well, actually, this is impossible to solve.
Yeah.
Because in a way, my first CEO job, this is where the kind of CEO piece comes into play, I suppose, is you're putting your name on the docket, right? If you fail there, goodbye. You ain't getting any more calls. So that's kind of the valuation. Now, I've always been that type of a person. I'll stick my head in. I don't mind. But you don't, at that point, you really don't know whether you're going to succeed or not. That you would only find out a little bit later.
So it's clear what boxes Pandora ticked for you personally. What boxes did you tick for the board and the chairman, do you think?
And this was also a funny conversation. So, and this just tells you at which state the company was at. The board, the board was not aligned on what the problem was, why the company was declining 10, 12% every month. Imagine that the leadership of the company, they fired the CEO, they fired the CFO, they put some interims in place, but the board itself, half of the board thought, oh, we have a big retail part of our business. No, we are a poor retailer, and that's the problem. We don't know how to retail, okay? The other part, they kind of vaguely thought maybe there's something wrong with the brand. They were not even sure about that, but that part of the board said, we don't think it's the retail side of things. The funny thing is the people that thought it was a retail issue were kind of the retailers, and the other people were either the generalists or the marketeers. Fascinating. So in the final interview, there was like 4 people from the board, 2 from each camp. And of course, the most aggressive retailer in the meeting said, well, I don't know why we're meeting you, because you have no retail experience. You're very old for a first-time CEO job, and you have 0 experience with the street. I said, okay, fine. Then Mr. Lacik comes out, and I said, great, you've had my CV for a while. I've done, I don't know how many interviews up to this point. I find this question really annoying because you knew I'm not a retailer. I worked with retail my entire life. But I'm certainly not a retailer. Working with stakeholders, that I've done my entire life, so I don't see that being any different. Yes, they are called financial analysts, but that doesn't bother me at all. But I think you don't have a retail problem. I think you have a huge brand problem. And if you can agree with that, then I think I'm a sensible candidate. I have global experience. I've done, brand turnarounds one after the other. We can talk about this if you want to. I've done a lot of organizational work. So I think I fit the bill of what you have in your search profile. The decision is yours, gentlemen.
And how did the early weeks transpire?
So yeah, that's interesting. So I called, well, of course I had some pre-meetings as you do, and you read a lot of material. What happened the search was very long. They started their search in the summer of 18, and I only started in, essentially May of 19. So it was a quite long period. What they also did at the same time that they started the search, they brought in an army of people from Boston Consulting to try to find out get to the bottom of what the actual problem is. So, and as we went through the process, I got to see some of that material. So in February, during the Q4 release and the annual guidance where they announced me, they also announced what was called Program Now, which was then kind of the outcome of this huge investment they had done with BCG. And of course, there was an understanding and agreement between me and the board that when I come 2 months later, I'm not going to rip up the whole program and say, no, we're going to start from scratch. That's kind of why they give me insight on it. My only comeback on that was, I think what they've come up with is sensible. I reserve the right to adjust or add some stuff, which I may or may not find as I get inside the company. So there was it was a 12-point program that had been agreed, which was labeled Program Now. And they were quite sensible at the end of the day. So I have this in my head, I'm coming into the company, hopefully that management team is working on these 12 points and let's discuss that. So I come in and what I had kind of picked up in my one-on-ones before was, well, actually we're doing a little bit more than the 12. My view was also 12 is already way too many. And you're telling me that you're doing more. Oh yeah. The interim leader is launching lots of other ideas. So I said, okay. So the first thing I did when I walked through the door, I said, okay, ladies and gentlemen, it was mostly gentlemen actually. I'm going to spend the next day trying to understand what you do. Because I don't know, and I know a little bit about the company, but you guys run the company. So tell me what your priorities are. So we listed the priorities we had like this huge whiteboard, and we came to 47 priorities. So and genuinely you don't need to be Einstein to figure out, you're trying to turn around the company and you have 47 priorities. That in and of itself is a car crash. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, we're not leaving here until we're back down to maximum the 12 we agreed. That was on this BCG. Whether it's the exact same 12, I don't know. Let's talk. And I said, and the way we're going to do this is we're all going to vote one by one, and whoever owns that priority is going to have to defend it in front of you. So we exited after 2 days of some interesting conversations, let's say. We were back to the 12. And actually, they were the 12 that BCG had proposed. And then, okay, so that was my first week, essentially. And then I went back on my chamber and said, okay, 12 is still nonsensical. There's never 12 things that are going to fix something that's going backwards. It's typically 1 or 2. That was my experience from all the other turnarounds I've made. So I said, I need to kind of get to the bottom of what is that 1 or 2 thing that actually is. And eventually I came to the point is we only actually have one priority. And that is we need to get the brand heat back in.
Very clear, very clear. So we'll come back to what you did in the transformation in a moment. I'm just curious to stick with the fact first CEOship, first listed CEOship, persuaded the board to give you a go at the assignment. Who was mentoring you and sponsoring you through this?
Nobody, to be honest. Eventually you did when you came on board. But up until that point, it was a very lonely spot. Because what happened on the same day they announced me coming in as a CEO, they also announced that the chair who had hired me was stepping down. And I took him sideways and say, hey, can you at least stay for a little while? I need some air cover. I don't know anybody. You hired me. I'm your decision. And you're walking out. There were some reasons why that happened, so I understand that. So he kind of stayed on for another 6-7 months, but essentially his mind was already checked out. So it was genuinely quite lonely in the beginning.
So a tough landing, no question, a tough landing. And you mentioned Maria a lot, understandably, and you have a large family as well. So what were they whispering in your ear during this time?
Maria, of course, is my complete opposite in every aspect of the world. If I drink alcohol, she doesn't. If I like hard cheese, she doesn't. She's go for soft cheese. If I like brown bread, she likes white bread. And that's our life. We're complete the yin and yang. So she doesn't understand anything that I do at work and has zero interest, which is kind of, but she's a really good listener. So she, in a way, she's the co-CEO, but being kind of the human side of the CEOship. Not giving me any suggestions, that doesn't work. But she listens, she absorbs, and she also makes me reflect. Because the type of questions you would ask back are none of the questions we business people ask each other. It comes from a completely different perspective. But it's very useful, especially when you're in that lonely place. It is in an indirect way extremely helpful.
Can you give us an example?
Well, I mean, so I go in and I say, I think the management team is not the right management team. Yeah, but you have to think about the human side of this and what signals are you sending to the rest of the organization if you just take them all out? It's like, because now you're kind of, when I came through the door, it was like the house is on fire. And a lot of the people were debating which paint we should be painting the fence with. And I'm like, no, get hold of a hose or leave. I need that to be fixed, which means you can be quite brutal. And then she helps me, I'm probably still am, but she certainly softened this aspect of, think about how you say. You may still say what you need to say, but, think through how you say those things. That, is a tiny example.
That's great.
This month, we've actually been together for 40 years.
Wow, congratulations.
And so she comes from a very human side. I come from a very technocratic side. And over time, I think she's made me a much better person. I don't think I've influenced her a bit. She stayed who she is. She's perfect. But she's made me a better person.
We said we'd come back to the Pandora story. What have you transformed?
Everything. Everything, genuinely. So where do we start? It kind of went in a couple of phases. I quickly realized that this company needs to be rebuilt bottom up. But now you're in a position where you're in a publicly listed company. You need to report every quarter to your owners of the progress, and then of course then they will judge you. You don't have a lot of time. So I devised kind of a plan which essentially had 3 different, quite distinct phases. The first one is we need to get some brand momentum going. You get some brand momentum going, we start getting a little bit of traffic back. You get a little bit of traffic back, your numbers are starting to look a little bit better. That buys you time. It's not necessarily the solve, but you need a little bit of air cover, especially when you have all these other things to do. So that was kind of phase 1. And we don't need to get into all the technicalities here, but that was like, put some brand heat back in. Secondly, get clear on who we are as a brand and what's the direction of this company. That you could call that kind of the strategy phase. And in there's probably 4 phases actually. As that was kind of starting to form, and that's now with the top team, that you don't do the strategy work with 40,000 employees, of course not. So that's the top team work, and you need to anchor it. In there, it was also very clear that we needed to change the organization and the people. So the talent agenda became huge. So that kind of came as a 2B, if you may. Strategy 2A, people 2B. So they were kind of in the same phase. And then the third phase is now the elevation of the brand, the product innovation, all of that. Because when you're in jewelry making, the time from idea conception to actually hitting the market, you're looking at 2 to 3 year timeline. So I couldn't start with that. So I said that will be the last phase, and that's kind of where we are now. And we're 7 years in. So, but it was quite distinct that we moved in those chapters, let's say.
And was it clear with this transformation that you were going to make this a hugely successful brand, or was there a period early on where you thought, I still don't know, maybe, and then the lights finally came on for you? Or tell us, how did that crystallize?
So the insight I had, and this, I shared this with the board, and maybe that's why they kind of gave me the shot at it. I said, we have an idea with this brand, but we've done nothing with the idea. So what you have is a vessel, and every brand is looking to find a vessel because it gives you shape, it gives you something to hold on to. But there's nothing inside this vessel; it's empty. So, and I think the idea of this brand is so perfect in this day and age, because all the other brands in this category are very serious. Jewelry is a quite serious category. Pandora is actually quite, a bit more carefree, a little bit more open, inclusive rather than exclusive. So we were playing the anti-codes of the category. And there was a huge taking for that. Consumers loved it. I met a lot of consumers, did a lot of consumer research, which convinced me of this. And it's a brand that doesn't talk down to people. Like a lot of the exclusive brands, I've defined who I am. You can join my tribe, but you don't get to influence who I am. Pandora is leveling and saying, come in to me. I'll give you a canvas. We'll give you some paint and some brushes. We might give you some ideas, but we're going to co-create this brand experience together. This is, if you think about what Gen Zs would tell you today, they don't want to be talked down to. They want to be talked with. They want to be side by side with you. So for me, it was like fantastic. As a brand guy, I said, this is perfect. This is such a great place to be from a brand standpoint. So I said, but we need to do all of that work. We have all the mechanics just sitting in front of us. The problem was with the previous generations of leadership teams, they were so focused on the retailing side of things. So they didn't do any of the brand work. So this was whatever brand was there had been running dry for almost 20 years. And at one point, these things crash. So a brand is like a relationship. You need to keep investing in it. But you need to be clear on who you are as an identity. So it was all there. Like, now we're a silver jeweler, but, it was a diamond in the rough. And I saw the diamond in the rough. We just needed to kind of clear it out. So that was really, and that work was the first thing I did, essentially saying, so what's the reason for this brand to exist? And there was many, many good reasons. I said, great, we know what they are. Now we need to tell people those things and stay consistent in that. So that was phase one. And what it did was it actually woke up a lot of our lapsed consumers. They said, oh, wow, the brand is back. So the trajectory of comeback was almost instant. And then I knew this is going to work.
So was this your flywheel?
And there were three things in that flywheel. One was, who is this brand? Clarity on, you write it on a piece of paper and then you work it and then it's written in stone, right? Then, okay, now I need to invest more in media. So I need to talk to more people and I need to take that brand purpose and turn this into interesting advertising. Those three things were the first things I did. And then traffic started flowing back. So now we have the money, this flywheel is doing, and then of course we're doing all sorts of other things. But that was the cornerstone of the starting point in my mind. And at that point I told Maria, I think we got this. And then she said, great, now we're moving to Denmark.
There you go. And it was at that point that you thought Pandora is going to be in the 30% of successfully transformed businesses, not in the 70 that don't quite make it?
I never even contemplated that. That was like just head down, keep going, find the right people like yourself, get people to come on board. Because initially nobody wanted to come to Pandora. The reputation of the company was disastrous. So it wasn't easy to because I knew this cannot be a one-man show. Maybe these first steps was a one-man show. But we're running a global business. I need a lot of good people around me. And
as you learned, a listed CEO, there are multiple stakeholders. So how did you, beyond the board and getting them excited about the idea, the vessel and the flywheel, how did you get the other stakeholders on board?
So of course there was a huge distrust from especially the financial community, because the share price, if we now take that as a marker for something, went from 200 at the IPO and maxed around 1,000 Danish kroner, and then went back down to 200. So imagine if you're now an investor, you invested billions at 600 kroner, and that drops to 2. I mean, people have scars on their back. People got fired because of the investment decisions they made. Nobody trusted whatever Pandora said, because it was almost like Titanic. They were on the deck having gin and tonics when the thing was sinking, and that's what they communicated to the street. So when we came in there the first time, oh my God, there was no trust. So it was really just, here is being very clear on the direction, and then say, and we will be coming back and back and back, and essentially we've delivered every promise we gave to the street. Because words are cheap, as you know. The proof is in the pudding. And it's taken years to rebuild the trust. So that was a simple message, and then deliver.
And what about the 27,000, I think it was back then, stakeholders you had right there?
Yeah, so very early on, I think it was one of the first town halls that I held, was I introduced this idea of the Pandora House, which was essentially, at that point in time, was the snapshot of I think this is the future strategy. We never said that this is it, but this has the componentry of what I think the Pandora house needs to contain. And at the very foundational pillar, it said people. And I remember a pointed question. I think this was like to the second town hall. We did a town hall every 3 months. I think on the second one was people were, because initially there was not a lot of work on this. It was like, we need to get some points on the board with all the kind of business decisions. And somebody then raised the hand and said, what about the people strike? You haven't done anything. I said, no, we haven't done anything yet. It will come. And trust me, it will be the cornerstone of the future success of this. You cannot build anything on flaky grounds. It just doesn't work like that.
And so customers, clients came with you on this journey?
Our customers are our consumers, right? So there was also initially was clarity on what the, let's say, growth algorithm should look like. What are the things that matter? And everybody had a different opinion. And that in and of itself is a problem. So you have some people say, we need to improve the conversion rate of people coming through the store or our online business. Or, we need to raise prices. We need to lower prices. We need a product innovation. We don't need product innovation. It was all over the shop. So then I spent some energy on trying to understand, what is the key driver? Of course, there are many drivers in any business. But what is the one thing that I need people to be focused on? And then we're going to incentivize people to do that thing. So you create a language of commonality, right? And and as I went through all the data, because we had quite a lot of transactional data in the business, there was the strongest correlation to growth was traffic. Okay? It was not conversion rate. It was not purchase frequency. It was not basket size. It wasn't units per transaction. And people were running around and chasing all those metrics. So and in the end, I found, no, none of these things actually move a lot. They're constants. So that in and of itself is already a statement to say, keep doing what you're doing. Don't let go of them, but don't overinvest energy behind them because they will not move the needle a lot. And I said, then we need to put all the energy on traffic. Traffic is the strongest correlation to like-for-like growth in our business. And therefore, you will all be bonused on like-for-like growth. So all of you guys that think selling in stuff to partners or whatnot, I don't care. I'm not going to incentivize that behavior. It's actually the wrong behavior. What we need to be thinking is doing things that are going to move things out of the store. And of course, then the marketeers, your job is to chase more people through the door.
You drive the traffic.
Yeah. So that was quite important to establish from the beginning. Nobody believed in incentive system in the company because the last 3 or 4 years, people got nothing out of it. So that was also important to set realistic targets, but with one goal.
And you're a data guy. You like metrics.
Yeah, I come from an engineering background. Done a lot of math earlier on in my career. Now it's just plus and minus, more plus than minus. But and part of the upbringing, I think, in P&G, that really landed it. This is a lot of people actually don't know that in the early days of P&G, and now we're probably in because this idea of brand management only really came around the 1920s and 30s. The people that were running the Procter company in those days, they were all engineers. Now, they had a label called marketing, but they all came from an engineering background. And engineers don't understand fluff and conceptual language. They want to turn everything into numbers because they know that 5 is more than 4. Therefore, I like the 5 better than the 4. So the whole discipline of marketing in P&G is actually founded on these engineers. So they try to demystify marketing. So it's all in numbers. So kind of having this mathematical background that I had just worked perfectly because all of a sudden, now of course, brilliant marketeers also have the magic aspect to it. So being able to think conceptually and creatively, but pairing it with data to prove the point. So I brought this into Pandora because here it was only about artistry. Despite the fact that we had loads of data, nobody used it. most of the general managers didn't even know how to read the P&L properly, which was like shocking coming from my Reckitt background, where everything was filtered, every decision, probably too much, was filtered through a P&L. What does it do to the P&L? Even the youngest associate brand manager would understand how to read the P&L. In Pandora, was like the CFO and me, and that was kind of it. Now being a little bit black and white, but generally, so I said we're going to keep the creative part because we need the magic, but we need to introduce a bit more science and data to help aid, to make better decisions. Ultimately, it's the human that makes the decisions, but we need both inputs, not just one.
And another CEO I was speaking to recently, he coined the phrase transformation absurdities. So some of the crazy things, you maybe know what I mean, some of the crazy things you find, like we have loads of data, but we never use it in our decision making.
Yeah.
Is that an example of an absurdity in Pandora?
Absolutely.
And were there others as well?
No, there was also this, but I don't know if one needs to understand the history to understand how to go forward. So I think you need to be not a scholar, but you need to be a student of the past, because it explains a lot of the behaviors that are there today. I always think that people come into work with a good intent. That people go there because they think they can do something good. But if the process and the system and the environment isn't conducive, then the outcome probably isn't that great as you would want it to be. So you had a lot of this, that's how we've always done it. To which my response was, yeah, but it's not working. So why do you keep doing it? Yeah, but we don't know anything better. I mean, I'll give you an example on marketing. I went to Australia. I said, why are you doing outdoor advertising? I'm not a fan of that, just conceptually, because it's too expensive in my mind. Anyways, no, we've always done it. And I said, yeah, but it's super expensive, and there's actually very little scientific evidence it does anything. And especially since we've just decided that we need to drive traffic, show me the evidence that it drives traffic. I don't know how to do. Okay, so let's do a market match test. So we take one city, we do all the advertising you want outdoor, and the other one we do nothing. Run this for 6 months, and then let's talk. So we run the research, and I hear nothing. And I have a good memory, so I pop an email to this person and said, hey, what happened with the research? Oh, yeah, I have it here. So can you send it to me, please? And it was black on white. The city with the outdoor advertising had no better traffic trends than the other one, which means it's just a waste. So I said, so why haven't you acted on this? Yeah, but we've always done it like that. So it was a lot of that. So in the end, what I did, I literally traveled around the globe myself and rewrote all the media plans myself. That's crazy. That's not what a CEO should do. But I did it to show people how to do it. Sometimes as a leader, I think in leadership, I always kind of had this idea of you either in the front of the troop, showing the way, or you're in the middle of the group, showing how to do things because maybe you have the skill set, or you're in the back, observing and trying to figure out new pathways. So I think good leadership is allowing yourself to position yourself depending on where the need is.
To move up and down. Yeah. So a moment ago I asked you, what have you transformed? And you've given an amazing catalogue of some of the things you encountered and how you came around a bit. 7 years on, what are you, from a metric or non-metric perspective, what status is Pandora in now?
So I'll start with the brand. So we, of course, we introduced a lot of metrics across the whole value chain. I mean, for people that don't know Pandora, we're vertically integrated. So you pop in silver grain in one end, and then you end up with selling and having the loyalty programs at the other end. We own the whole thing. To run this in an efficient way, you need to have metrics along the way. Okay, so I think the big transformation has been on the brand. This used to be not an attractive brand. So, and all my brand metrics, be it from awareness down to consideration or purchase, that's changed. A great metric is we used to have, when I started, 450 million visits through our channels globally. Last year we were close to 900 million. That just doesn't happen by itself. And the 450 was actually on a steep decline when I came in. So the brand has been totally transformed.
Amazing.
And I think the ultimate, recognition of that is we just got in for the second year in a row on Interbrand's top 100 most valuable brands in the world.
Congratulations.
So now, awards is nice. I can put it on my CV if that was important. But it's a great recognition that we're now in the elite of the elite. There are only 2 Danish companies up there. It's Lego and it's us. There are only 2 other jewelry companies in the world, Tiffany and Cartier. So I think we were the ugly duckling, clearly, 7 years ago. We were nowhere. People didn't want to touch the brand. So that's one important transformation. That, of course, wouldn't have been possible without transforming the organization. So because ultimately it's a people business. Now, what's the metric on that? A couple of things. First of all, if I look at the NPS score, we're in the top 5% of our respected industry. That's among 4,000 companies. And it keeps going up all the time. So the last one we got in was just shy of 70. The score go from -100 to +100. And we had 82% participation rate among 37,000 people. The sheer fact that people contribute shows that they're interested. And that's massive in my book. So if I then look at retention rates, we will soon actually have parity amongst men and women in the leadership of the company. When I started, it was 1 out of 5. Within the next 6 months, we'll be half and half.
Fantastic.
So there's no glass ceiling here. This
Great.
is really an inclusive company. We measure things like leadership effectiveness, inclusivity, and all these are top scores. So it's a great place for people to come and work. And that is the foundation. Again, coming back to my Pandora house, that's the foundation on which we can build this thing.
So let's dive into that a little bit deeper. So I guess if you think back to 2019, the organization you inherited then, what were the chances of successful transformation with what you inherited?
None.
Okay. You said that very quickly.
Yeah, because, in the first 12 months, we shed 1,000 people. And when I say that to other business colleagues or whatever, they go like, "Are you mad? That is a crazy." But my take was that the people that had taken the company to that point, they had done a great job, but they had no toolbox to take it to the next level. And the company was going backwards it was like a deer in a headlight. I didn't see any skill sets. A lot of people, this was their first job, and they were very senior positions. We were running a global company. We're present in 100 countries, with own organizations in many, many countries. Most of these people had never traveled outside of Denmark. I'm being a bit black and white here, but so we just did not have the crew that could build this to where we are today. So that was a very immediate one, and I mean, we went on a very aggressive buy strategy to get the right talent in. Now, of course, when you take out that many people and replace them with people from all walks of life, all around the globe, whatever you thought was your corporate culture is gone. Because everybody is going to come and they're going to bring their own values into this thing. So there was also a phased approach. So, brand, strategy, get the people in, then we need to do culture work. Very serious culture work. That was the time when we invited the entire company to give us feedback. I mean, you remember this very well. And it wasn't like ditching the old values, but we took those, and then we took the input from the organization. Of course, then as a leadership team, we needed to set the direction of where we want to go with this. So actually, now that I'm soon about to leave the company, and I've always said this, nobody's going to remember the numbers. I might remember them, but what people will remember is how you make them feel. And I think the culture which we've created makes people feel very safe. They can grow their careers there, whether they want to stay in a country or move on. They can develop functionally, and it's a great place to be. And that's probably the biggest contribution that I will leave behind. If I'm honest.
I was going to ask you that. You've beaten me to it. That's fascinating. So say a little bit more about the culture work that you did, and maybe describe it as well for folks. Yeah.
So we have 4 core values, which are dream, dare, care, and deliver. That's kind of where we started. But then we said, well, hang on, it is a teamwork. So we've added the we in front of all 4 of them. So it's we dream, we dare, we care, we deliver. Because collaboration is incredibly important, especially if you're in a global matrix, is even more. And that's still where there's the tension point. But by design, you will have those tension points. But we're trying to work with them in a constructive way. And they built a little bit on what was there before. They built on the input we got from the organization. So we, I mean, you actually led the work, so you can answer the question better than me. But we took a lot of input. I think we did this global survey, and at the time we were like 25,000 people. And I think we got like 45,000 comments, written call comments.
It was vast. If I remember, it was about 1,000 pages. Yeah.
And it probably would have been nice to have the AI tools that we have today.
Perfect. Yeah.
but there was so much value, and the sheer fact that people wanted to participate in and of itself is great. So it meant that people actually did care about this brand and this company. And then, of course, we had to kind of make some sense out of it. And then we took those 4 core values, and then we said, okay, attached to those values, what do we want leadership behaviors to look like? So again, we used the values to drive the thinking around, and actually being quite descriptive on this is what good leadership in Pandora looks like, and this is what we don't want to happen in Pandora. And I remember early on, we in the executive team, we said we need to call out each other when we don't live the values, because people look up at the exec team and say, whatever, you can say one thing, but what you do is actually what you mean. So I said, so it's incredibly important we stand up as one unit and showcase these values. And that took some work to get us there. But as I said, I think today these values live vividly in the organization. And I think, as I said, I think this is probably the one of the true testaments of the work that we've done.
That's great. And I think for a lot of new CEOs facing a transformation, quite often as part of that, there is a big cultural component. And I think some CEOs stumble a little bit. How to do it, how to make it real, how not just to have some wallpaper. How do we actually embed this and make it real for people? So things like ELT, feedback conversations, like you mentioned, and really holding each other's feet to the fire.
Yeah.
Walking the talk, not just talking the talk. Some of those things became important. But you did other things as well around performance, around reward, to really embed the culture, didn't you?
So again, going back to the history, so this was like, the culture that I found was like almost like a startup, the largest startup in the world, with all these people running around, everybody having their own interpretation, a very decentralized company. Not this whole idea of collaborating was non-existent. All the markets, they were doing their own thing. So from a business standpoint, if we start there, we didn't leverage the scale advantage that Pandora actually intrinsically had, which was kind of crazy. And of course, I came from companies that really perfected, leveraging the scale that they had. And I kind of saw that, wow, we have a major opportunity here. And that's probably another thing I should have mentioned on the cultures. Because sometimes you come into a company and there's this plaque on the wall, and it's like these values, they live in its universe of its own. Some people care about them, some don't. But actually what we did here, we started with forming the view of where are we going? What's the growth strategy that we're about to do? Then we got the people in that we thought could deliver that strategy. And then we said, now we need values that are supporting the growth strategy. So it's not a separate exercise. Having value for the sake of value is difficult. But having values that support the direction in which you're going, then the thing kind of hangs together. So that was very important. Now, coming back to your other question on, there was no real structure in the company. We had units that had 7, 8 bands. We had units that had 15 bands. We had places where people were, ditching out long-term incentive plans. Others that didn't. There was no transparency on why did you get promoted? Well, I don't really know. What's the career path? Nobody knows. If your boss likes you, then that's probably a good start. Not the performance. So it was a very, very organic shape of this thing. And I said, that if you're a one country operation, it probably works. And if you're not too many people, let's call it 100 or 150 people, you can probably run very loose like that. I don't think it's a great idea, but you could probably survive and be relatively successful. When you're running a fully global company with all these people running around everywhere, I don't think it's a great idea. So we decided to only have 6 bands, with all the headache because that was obviously impossible to only have 6 bands. I mean, you remember well. To this day, this is a conversation. And we just were hard-headed on this. It is 6, period. Go figure out a solution. And there are always solutions. And I think you always told me that GE, which had 10 times as many employees, only had 5 bands. So I'm like, oh, why wouldn't we be able to do 6? Maybe we should have 3. Anyways, so we put this structure in place. We crafted job descriptions, job roles, and we tried to, with this, create clarity on, how do we see career pathing? Because, you take in a lot of talented people. They're interested in furthering their careers.
Yep.
So, but then we needed that transparency. How does pay work? Why is he getting more than? Yeah, because there was no pay structure. So we put proper pay banding in place. We clarified all the kind of bonus programs, who's in, who's out, what are the levels, how is this equitable? Does it need to be the exact same in North America from Europe? Probably not, because the pay structure in the country is somewhat different. So we allowed a little bit of give and play in that space. So essentially what I'm trying to describe is you have this spaghetti and we said, okay, we need structure in the spaghetti. We still like the spaghetti bolognese to eat it, but there needs to be some structure because then it becomes equitable with the transparency that we offer. And that, I think, is a cornerstone of why we have such high engagement scores today. That noise is literally gone today.
Great.
So I do think that was important.
And you drove the cultural alignment as well with short-term incentives and long-term incentives, didn't you, with the relevant groups?
So as I said, when we came in, because the company had been they've been missing their targets for years and years. So in the management layers of the company, there was no belief that a performance, let's say, performance-oriented pay structure was meaningful, because they are not going to get any bonus anyway. So why should I stretch myself? So then and we had to reset that whole, again, coming back to the core value. We said, the last one is we deliver, which is a hardcore performance element. But we said one thing is to say that we need to incentivize people. We need to give them sensible targets that they feel that they can actually reach. And some people, we want to focus also on the long-term health of the company. That's top of the house, let's say. But then we also want to have as many people as possible inside the short-term incentives. Again, like for like, was the same across from me down to the rep in the store, all incentivized on the same thing. And then again, clarity on where I sit versus this. And today, as I said, a lot of the GMs didn't even know how to read the P&L. Today, they're very, very proficient on reading it, because now they understand it's linked to their performance bonus, let's say. And that's a good conversation to have, because we're talking about the right things. So I think that was transformational.
And it sounds like you've aligned interests as well between the top of the company, the middle of the company, shareholders, other interest groups through bonus design.
Yeah. I mean, again, coming back to we wanted everybody to focus on this kind of like for like, because we knew that drives growth. And if you look at the history since we got there, that's what we've been delivering. And then when we deliver, people understand where they sit on the spectrum and how they contribute. So I think that's very important. And if you talk to the lady, or we have a lot of female employees in the stores, and they understand where they sit in the spectrum of the whole company. So I think that alignment is incredibly important. And of course, every year we discuss whether we should change it or add or do that. And that's a healthy conversation to have. But we've never walked away from overemphasizing the like-for-like component of the company. And if you then speak to the financial community, 80% of our valuation is tied to like-for-like. So it actually is a metric that runs not just inside the company, but also lined up with our external stakeholders.
So it sounds like early on you really nailed it.
Well, I mean, and all of this was obviously not only me, just to be clear. So this conversation was together with the exec team and the teams underneath. So I'm just happening to be at the front of this story. But I mean, I have to recognize there were a lot of other people involved in this.
Of course, of course. Now, you mentioned the exec team a few times. You inherited an exec team in 2019. It looks slightly different now. And of course, the kind of, you talked about the bands below the exec team or C-suite as well, got a lot of attention.
Yeah.
What was your vision there, and have you fulfilled it?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, there's hardly anybody left from what I inherited. There are a few. I wanted to have a smaller exec team. I think it was 13 when I got there. That's already too many in my mind. So that we've skinned that down. That's 8, including myself today. I put all the key functions on there, which in some other instances, probably some of these functions wouldn't be on an exec team. So it depends on what it is you want to highlight. So I think we have all the key stakeholders in the company, and that's how I run the company. I run the company through the exec team. Then what we also did was we actually expanded the view of the exec team, not by title, but we crafted something we called a senior leadership team. So all the people reporting into the exec team, so you go from this pyramid of 8, and then we're including roughly 50 people or something along those lines, 50, 60 people. They are kind of in the tent. So whenever and early on, we actually used this group for input, for creation of different programs. And as time has gone by, it's less of that because we have a strategy, and I'm a believer if it works, let's not kind of play with it, and we'll stick to it. So now it's become more of a communication tool, to be honest. So we can now reach quickly into the organization. So if there's a big change or there's something which we're not certain of, then we can gather this group. There's a periodic, we meet probably every other month to have this. It's a 1 hour call, 2 hour call max, 2 or 3 topics, and so that's alive. And it also, the people that are in there, they feel much more involved in the leadership of the company. It's not just the exec team sit in a dark corner and then they come out and the white smoke goes through the chimney. That's not how we run it. It's a very inclusive approach.
Which is great for developing your senior leaders as future enterprise leaders as well, isn't it? Exposing them to some of the big topics. Yeah. What about metrics? Organization metrics. You touched on it a moment ago, and I think you're very proud of some of the numbers, top decile advocacy numbers, for example, which strikes me as particularly impressive given that globally in large corporates, advocacy numbers are falling.
Yeah.
So is that one that you're most proud of or something else?
No, I think that, so we have a couple. So the engagement one is important for me because it's like you're taking the temperature somehow. And we measure it every quarter. We actually measure it down to the individual store, if that's one performance unit that we have. And we can actually correlate the business results of the NPS on the leadership score and at the store level. And there's a very clear correlation. You have a good store manager, you know what? Your business in that store is going to be better. That's just one example, of course, but this is true across the company. There's another one, because we went on this kind of, you could call it buying spree for talent early on. We also knew that we cannot continue doing this. It's expensive and it's not very efficient over time. So then we said we need to rebalance and move to more of a build agenda. So then we put a lot of programs in place. And one of the metrics we look at is how much of the senior talent is coming from the outside and how much is coming from within. We have a target of roughly 2/3 should be coming from within, and then we have 1/3 because it's also good to get fresh blood from the outside. We are today close to between 55 and 60% from the inside. When you and I started, which was literally nothing, so we had to buy everything. So I think in quite a few years we've managed to move that metric up.
That's
As
great.
I said, another one on which is actually we have 3 publicly let's say published ESG targets. One of them is around diversity. Now we can all talk that diversity is more than just gender, but that's the one which we've committed ourselves and actually tied the financing of the company to. And then when we started was in senior leadership position, we had 1 out of 5 was a woman. Very soon it's going to be 50-50. And that's in the stretch of 4 years. I worked in other companies where they had the exact same ambitions. They're still standing on the same spot that they stood for 15 years ago. So I think this is actually a major achievement.
What's different about at Pandora that's made it possible?
Well, it's the intention from the top. I've tied a significant portion of the long-term incentive plan for the leadership to this metric. So if you don't do it, your colleagues will remind you. We have a list which we review every month in the executive team. How are we doing? So it's purely mathematical. We can also see who is contributing and who is not contributing. You know, with all of that, you know, it's good to have these lists. And then you know, when we recruit, of course, it's always about getting the best possible talent for each position. But to then say that we can't is too easy. So when in the early days was whenever we went, we said we want to have an overweight of female candidates on the shortlist, just to make sure. Because in the beginning, when we said we want a shortlist from the headhunters, you know, they would give us pretty much only males because that's what they had in their Rolodexes. They said, no, that's not good enough. So we said for each man, we need to have 2 women, just to make the point to these people.
It's a great practice, isn't it?
And yeah.
And your board role models this very well.
Well, I mean, there's been 50-50 for a while. But of course, the population is 7 people, so it's a little bit easier when you're trying to do the whole company with thousands and thousands of
and
people.
your successor is a woman.
She's a woman, and that's great. It's the first female CEO. Now, we're having a conversation with Berta on this because, of course, she doesn't want to have the conversation in media, which has been, now finally there's a female CEO. What they should say, finally, another great CEO that happens to be a woman and in that order.
Yeah.
So skill has to be always the driving force. The fact that we have a lot of skilled women is great that they also get the opportunity. That's the way to think about it.
Fantastic. Now, we can't finish a conversation on organization transformation nowadays without talking about the impact of AI as well.
So I would say it's early days to talk about major impact. The one area where we are applying, so our business, when it comes into the 4th quarter of the year, means this is when in the last quarter we make 40% of the business in a year, which means essentially you have long queues outside. We love the queues, don't get me wrong. But it also means I need more staff. So we hire in this period of the year, I think this year we hired 7,000 extra people on top of the 15,000 that we have more as a permanent part of the staff. So you can imagine it's a massive increase of talent intake. We got over 200,000 applications.
That speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Which is great, but of course you can imagine if I'm not going to ask the store manager to sift through their share of that, they'll be doing nothing but.
They won't be selling much.
And that's not what I want them to focus on. So that's where we've applied actually AI technology to make sure that, you know, we can kind of figure out a short list out of these 200,000. And I'm not sure the technology is perfect, but surely it's working much better than what we used to do. So that's a kind of very real application that's out there today. There's another one also in the kind of people space, because we have, I don't know, I don't remember the number. I think if we break down all the employee hours, I think we are deploying over 20 million hours every year. So you can imagine a little bit more efficiency there saves a lot of money. So what I don't want to have is a lot of people in the store and no traffic. Now, how do you work those schedules? Historically, paper and pen and the poor store manager trying to work out who should be where. very burdensome. Again, if you run a Singapore business with 6 stores, okay, that's probably doable. When you run a US with 500 stores, forget it. It's simply not an efficient model. So what we've introduced is something called workforce management. And the tool takes historic data on performance of our people. It takes the historic traffic trends, and then it projects 13 weeks out what the traffic trend should be, and therefore, consequently, where to deploy the hours. But not just the hours. You also want to have your best people when you have high value hours. So this AI tool gives you a proposal. It's not deciding. It gives you the proposal, but it saves you all the admin work around getting to the point where I can make the decisions.
That's great. So you're really putting your people dollars as well, where they're going to have maximum
Absolutely.
impact. Yeah, fantastic. That's great. Okay, so Transformer CEO, clearly.
I don't know.
What would, as you look at maybe your own profile, and you also look at other people doing similar roles to you, and you look at the DNA of a Transformer CEO, what are some of the common traits that you see?
This is going to be a question reflecting more on myself than trying to give other people advice, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, going through kind of different experiences I've had, I think there's a time and place for all of us. So you put me in a job which says success looks like, please hold the ship steady, grow 2% year on year. I'd probably do a terrible job because I'd be bored stiff after 2 weeks. So it's kind of finding the right profile for the right challenge. I think that's probably and when you get to this level of seniority, of course, you've built out quite an ego. You think you're the master of the universe or the transformer of the universe. But the truth of the matter is you're not good at everything. And having that, let's say, self-reflection or to dare stare yourself in the mirror and say, I'm really good at this. I'm not so good at this. Sometimes it could also, like in my case here, clearly I was not a retailer. So the answer I also gave the other board members to say, the first hire I'm going to do is to get a world-class retailer next to me. Because I'm covering an angle that I know I can learn it, but that's silly. Why would I spend the energy on that? Let's get somebody that can help me drive the company, which is what we also did. So understanding your blind spots but also understanding where you're really good. Where is your strength? I think this is the first insight, I would say. Then as you get inside, if you're in this kind of transformative type of situations, I think you need to have a high spike on daring, not being afraid of taking decisions which may or may not be popular. So I think that's an important one. I think it's very important that you're clear on your direction. Where am I heading? And then you need to be really good as a communicator to get people to follow you. Because just, I have a great strategy, I'm emailing it to you and assuming that you're going to come along. I mean, that's rubbish. And it happens. Honest to God, it happens. So clarity on direction, being able to sell the vision, and then, of course, executing. All of this other stuff, that's the academic part of it. And everybody can say, I love your plan, but now show me the money, right? So execution is then when it all happens. And there, I think it's very important to surround yourself with the people that are aligned to your vision and are willing to go that extra mile to achieve what you're going to. Without those componentries, I think it's very difficult to change something. From a mindset standpoint, I think you have to be very flexible, very agile. If you have a too rigid mindset, that's going to get you into a lot of trouble. Because even though now it sounds like everything was crystal clear, trust me, under the cover, nothing is crystal clear. You have to kind of figure out the ways how you get there. So I think having an agile mind, not being afraid, accepting that there will be some failures along the way. Now, of course, it's always better to have a few more strikes on the board than the fails. So that balance, of course, is important. You coined an expression which I've adopted, is have this say-do ratio needs to be sky high. Because that also delivers trust, or instills trust in the people around you. Say, yeah, he says he's going to do it. He did it. Yeah, okay, good. And the more consistent you are, the easier is the followership aspect.
Yeah, and I'd imagine that was really important for your external stakeholders in particular.
Absolutely,
not just, but certainly.
And there, we
street.
always get blamed for that. We are kind of being too conservative, and all sorts of adjectives along that way. And I always say, I mean, you can put the adjective. I will always deliver what I promise to you. So under promise and over deliver is also a quite good equation within reason. You can't completely ditch things and then turn up. That looks like you're not in control. But having a touch, if I say I'm going to grow 5% and we turn up with 6%, yeah, that's a good outcome.
So we focus on some very serious qualities. But what about humor?
Humor, yeah. I mean, I think it's very individual. If I look at myself, I don't have a chip on my shoulder. I don't take myself too seriously. You need to be able to have a laugh. I mean, one of the things I learned in Reckitt, which was a very different aspect from P&G, that was very serious. I mean, joking was not kosher, let's say, to the same degree. Whereas in Reckitt, we would have fights like there's no tomorrow with my boss or with the CEO, whoever, and we enjoyed it. And afterwards, we go out and have a beer together. So focus on the issue, not on the person, and then having a laugh and having a bit fun. I mean, spend most of my wake time here, so it cannot only be serious. Of course, there's serious matters which we deal in, but you can do this in a light-hearted way or in a very, very dark way. So I think that helps. I don't remember where this was. We talked about the smell of the place. So when you walk through in a corporate office, within 2 seconds, you get the smell of the place. I either like it or I don't like it. I don't know. That's a visceral reaction that sits there. And I think the smell of the place in Pandora is pretty cool.
So as you think about senior talent, and you've developed a lot of senior talent, you've hired a lot of senior talent, you've developed your own successor, how do you develop some of these characteristics that you say are really important for big corporate leadership in the next generation?
This is a difficult question, actually, because I know you would label me as a low feedback guy, which is probably true. But when you get feedback from me, it's something I really mean.
I fully agree.
So I think then when we engage in a conversation and sometimes it's not even feedback, it's this is what I think about this, and then people take that for coaching. I mean, that is obviously a great point, because somehow we've managed to create an environment where the barriers are down. There are no walls, because you somehow you have instilled some level of trust that when it comes from me, I genuinely mean it, and it can be praise, and it can be the opposite of that as well. So that's it. I've always taken a keen interest in making sure that people feel comfortable. I came from a place where, as I said, my immigrant background didn't allow always people to be able to speak their mind, because people put a label on you. And since then, I've always been a big proponent of respecting the individual, irrespective of where they come from. If there's a first day on the job and they just come straight out of school, yeah, I'm keen on listening. I want to hear your opinion. Or whether you've been around for 30 years and we've seen it all before type of mentality. It doesn't matter. So we try to create an environment where people really freely can think and say what they. Then I think you're getting the best out of people.
Yeah.
I also really encourage, and I call it, when two strong ideas or two strong people come together, sparks will fly. Don't be afraid of the spark. The spark is for me is a sign of something better came out. Get hold of the spark. we all became a little bit richer going out of that interaction. It's also why a lot of my leadership, when I think I'm at my best, is actually in interaction with people. Sometimes I don't even know where my ideas come from, because sure as hell coming into me, and I didn't have that idea. But in the moment, when I see these 5 things flying around, I say, that's interesting. Let's now kind of, and that will mean friction. By definition, means friction. And that you need to allow. And sometimes I push very hard, and sometimes I can kind of release. So that's probably. I think my coaching is more people observing me than me giving you, here are 5 points that I observed you do. That's kind of not how I do it. I don't think I do that very well, at least. But kind of probably just being around, watching is another way of, to say, providing coaching, I suppose. I mean, we know that adult learning is by doing rather than by textbook. And that's more repetition, is more for kids. So if they see interesting things happening in how we approach issues or problems, or allow that conversation to flow the way we do in the exec team, I think it's quite useful for people to observe.
That's great. And what about next generation CEOs? So people who are kind of stepping into the 2019 scenario that you did. What couple of things would you say to them? Words of wisdom.
Wow. Now, I think you very quickly need to get down to what is it I'm here to do. I think a mistake you can do is that you gravitate into your own comfort zone. I'm a good marketeer, therefore I'm going to start by doing marketing. Well, but if I have a sales problem, then ain't the right thing to do. So I think that's job one. What am I here to do? What is it that actually matters that I sort out or we find a solution to? Which is why, for instance, when I came in, we have what, 12,000 people at the time in manufacturing. I said, manufacturing is working wonders. I'm not going to spend any energy on that. And I told the guy, I said, we see each other once a month in the exec, and that's it. I don't have time for you. The same with the retail guy. I said, I think our retail is it's okay. Is it world class? No, but it's not the issue. Then the poor marketing people got all of my attention, unfortunately, because I said, here is where we have the issue. Now, none of these people are around anymore because they were just not capable of solving the problem. So applying, being that clarity, I think is
so brutal. Very clear thinking, be very clear on the mandate, avoid pet projects.
Yeah. Because I think it's very easy to just gravitate into, I'm good at this. Yeah, but does it matter? No, maybe not.
So a few quick questions to wrap up.
Okay.
Well, I say quick questions. Maybe they won't be. Let's see. So are transformer CEOs born or bred?
Whoa. I think your characteristics are born. Then I think you can refine them through the breeding. I look at my own kids. They're all different in character. Some of them I would put in a transformative situation. Some others I wouldn't. And I think they would agree with me. And that's the same gene pool, I hope. In a way, the same breeding environment. But so, that's probably what I've seen. Yeah.
And transformative briefs, is that a one-time thing, or once you've done it, you want to stick with it?
If I go to myself, my energy is clearly on solving, tricky problems. That's what I like to do. So so as I said, you give me kind of a steady state thing, I'm like, no, not interested. That doesn't it doesn't stimulate me from an intellectual standpoint that much.
Okay, and demand for transformer CEOs in the next 5 years?
Oh my God, this is gonna go through the roof because this is interesting. And I'll give you an example. So I came to Pandora, and you kind of go through and learn your learning curve, right? One of them was cost of goods. We are silver jewelers. I said, so, tell me about how we buy silver, what is cost, and how does it work? Yeah, I mean, it's been $16 an ounce for the last 10 years. So we don't talk about it. We just assume it was 16. There's nothing on the horizon. There's no big demand, new demand coming after silver. So we project 16. Because then my question is, so why are we hedging? Because we buy a hedge forward. Why would we hedge if we think it's 16. Yeah, but okay, then we at least know, and we can go to the street and say, for next year, we know COGS is fixed, so you don't need to worry about that. Okay, where's silver today? 5 years on, silver has tripled in price. This in and of itself is gonna completely change the entire jewelry industry as we know it. So if you now have a leadership experience that is the steady state mindset, good luck. And silver is just one example. I mean, we have so much turbulence around us in every aspect of life. I mean, I've been 7 years at Pandora. I haven't had one easy year. There's always one big headwind. Pandemics, the war in Ukraine, inflation. Now we have, US making all sorts of noise. Every year, something different. So I think having these type of leaders that are agile and are flexible and can find new solutions when everything is moving around you, I think is going to be an incredibly important skill.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about supply? What comments would you make about supply of such leaders?
I think you can find them. But the way we train them, probably the methods which we've been used to, maybe that's an area which needs a shape up. Probably, yeah. Now there's going to be lots and lots of opportunities to be confronted with difficult situations across the businesses. So then maybe making sure that we match the type of talent that we throw against these challenges. That's an opportunity to breed more of that stock.
Indeed. And final point, which I think is an important one, is what or should there be a reward premium for transformer CEOs?
I think, in a listed company, in any company, it's an ownership question ultimately. And I think if you're in a difficult spot, irrespective, and you're serious about solving it, then probably there's a premium to be paid for people that have those type of skills. So if you ask me to do the steady state, yeah, that probably the value of that generation may be less than in a turnaround situation. But I think it probably depends. I wish that I had asked for no salary, but just give me a slice of the market cap improvement. That would have been a very nice deal. No, I wasn't that smart, so...
Hindsight's a wonderful thing.
Yes, it is.
Listen, Alexander, thank you for coming on Transformer CEOs. I think this show's made for you, actually. but I just want to, because in your customary modesty, you've missed out a few things as well. So one of them you kind of touched on and brushed aside, but I just want to, for the record, FT says one of the best companies in Europe to work for, #1 in Denmark. Yahoo says one of the most valuable luxury companies in the world. Interbrand says one of the most valuable brands in the world. And Time says one of the most sustainable companies in the world and #1 in Denmark. That's not a bad rap sheet to be finishing up with.
Oh, we've done quite some good work. But I want to end on that note. We talk about leadership, but I genuinely feel this is a team effort. So without great people like yourself on my side, this would never have happened. So good leaders also understand the value of surrounding yourself with a team that does deliver all of these good things.
Thank you. Well, it was certainly a career highlight for me. So thank you for coming on the show. I really like the Pandora pink shirt as well. That was perfect for the occasion.
You have to live the brand, don't you?
You do indeed. Thank you, Alexander.
Okay. Thank you very much, Erik.